Okay, fourth grade, we are ready for chapter 9 of Hank. Hank is kind of one, he is joining the coyote camp, and the title of chapter 9 is Me Just a Worthless Coyote. That business about the secret was the perfect stroke, and it probably saved my life. In desperation, I had lucked into it. Turns out that coyotes are superstitious animals, even though they're known to be cunning and vigilant. I don't know how to spell that word. Spelling is a pain in the neck. I do my best with it, but I figure if a guy has a tremendous gift as a writer, his audience will forgive a few slip-ups in the spelling department. I mean, it doesn't take any brains to open a dictionary and look up a word. Anybody can do that. The real test of a writer comes in the creative process. I try to attend to the big picture, don't you see? And let the spelling take care of itself. Vigilant. Still doesn't look right. Well, anyways, coyotes are superstitious brutes, and that deal about the secret caught them just right and saved my hide. Actually, it did better than that. It made me a kind of celebrity in the tribe, and I was treated like a visiting dignitary. Oh, who cares? By everyone but Scraunch, that is, and he continued to give me hateful glances and mutter under his breath every time our paths crossed. I couldn't blame him for being sore. I had won and he had lost, and you can't expect everyone to be a good loser. As we say in the security business, show me a good loser and I will show you a loser. Scraunch had lost a big one, and I was confident that he would hate my guts forevermore, even though there was a good chance that I would eventually become his brother-in-law. You know, when Missy had first mentioned that possibility, it hadn't struck me as a very good idea. I suppose at that time I was still thinking of going back home. Back to Drover and Pete and the chickens, the sewer, the cowboys, my old job. But a couple days in the coyote village pretty muchly convinced me that I had found my true place in the world as a savage. The life of a savage ain't too bad. I admit that I was raised with a natural bias against coyotes. Ma always told us that they were lazy, sneaky, undisciplined, and didn't have any ambition. But what chafed her most about coyotes was they ate rotten meat and it made them smell bad. True, every word of it, but what she didn't tell us, was that laziness and riotous living can be a lot of fun. I don't blame her for not telling us that. I mean, she was trying to raise a litter of registered, papered, blue-ribboned, top-of-the-line cow dogs, and there's no better way to mess up a good cow dog than to let him discover that goofing off beats the heck out of hard work. I discovered it by accident, and once I had a taste of indolence, I loved it. I mean, all at once I had no responsibilities, no cares, no worries. When I woke up in the morning, I didn't have to wonder if my ranch had made it through another night, or if I would get yelled at again for something I hadn't done. About a week after I joined the tribe, I made friends with two brothers named Rip and Snort. They were what you'd call typical good old boy coyotes. Filthy, smelled awful, not real smart, loved to fight and have a good time, and had no more ambition than a couple of fence posts. If Rip and Snort took a shine to you, you had two of the best friends in the world. If they didn't happen to like your looks or your attitude, you were in a world of trouble. I got along with them. One evening, long toward sunset, they came around and asked if I wanted to go carousing. I was feeling refreshed since I'd slept a good part of the day. I got up around noon, ate a piece of rabbit that Missy had caught, and then went back to bed. I was all rested up, and I said, "Sure, I'd love to go carousing." So off we went, me and Rip and Snort, on a big adventure. We went down the canyon, crossed that big sandy draw that cuts through there, and then on across some rolling country until we came to the old silage pit. I'd been by it many times, but I'd never taken time to go down into the pit and check things out. By the time I took over the ranch, the cowboys had quit feeding silage, so I didn't know much about it. Silage is kind of where they put, like we would put grass clippings and leaves and stuff. It's where they put the extra stuff, and it just kind of rots and ferments, but it's for plants. So one of the things I didn't know about silage was that it fermented, which means that it's got some alcohol in it, which means that if a guy eats enough of it, his attitude about the world will begin to change. All those years I'd spent on the ranch, and I never knew any of that. But Rip and Snort knew all about silage. Yes, they did. And if they had made a well-packed trail, into and out of the silage pit. So we started eating silage. Struck me as kind of bitter at first, but the more I ate it, the less I noticed the bitterness. By George, after about an hour of that, I thought it was sweet as honey. We ate, and we laughed, and we laughed, and we ate, and when it came time to leave, Rip and Snort had to drag me out of there. Fellers, 'cause I just couldn't get enough of that fine stuff. A big moon was out, and we went single file down a cow path, Snort in the lead, me in the middle, and Rip on the caboose. Funny thing, that cow path kept wiggling around, and I had a devil of a time trying to stay on it. I asked Rip about it, and he said he was having the same trouble. Dern path kept jumping from side to side. I suspect the silage had something to do with that. That's what I suspect. Well, the next thing I knew, Snort topped a rise and came to a sudden halt, which caused a little pileup with me running into Snort and Rip running into me because couldn't any of us see real well at that point. "Stop here," said Snort. "Sing many song. Sing pretty, sing loud, teach Hunk Coyote song." So we all sat down on our haunches, threw back our heads, and started singing. Let's see if I can remember how the song went. Okay, so here's the picture of them sitting on their haunches and singing The Full Moon. Me just a worthless coyote, me howling at the moon. Me like to sing and holler, me crazy as a loon. Me not want job or duties, no church or Sunday school. Me just a worthless coyote. And I don't remember the last part, only it rhymed with school, pool, drool, I don't know, something like that. It was a crackerjack of a song. We ripped through it a couple of times until I had her down, and then we divided up. Snort took the bass, Rip carried the melody, and I got up on the high tenor. Don't know as I ever heard better singing. It was one of them priceless moments in life when three very gifted guys come together and blend their talents and sort of raise the cultural standards of the whole dang world. I mean, it was that good. We sang it 4 or 5 times, and then all at once, Snort's ears perked up and he lifted his paw. We stopped and listened. Off in the distance, we heard yapping. There was something familiar about that yap, but for a minute I couldn't place it. And then it occurred to me we were sitting on a spot that was just a quarter mile or so north of the ranch headquarters. That yapping was coming from Drover. I think Rip and Snort had took a notion to amble down there and see if they could get into a fight. I had to explain that they couldn't run fast enough to get Drover into a fight, and that it would be a waste of their time. "Let me go down and talk to him," I said. "He's an old buddy of mine. We used to work together. Maybe he'll come back and sing with us. We could use another guy on baritone." They shrugged. Snort sat down and started scratching his ear. "More fun fight, but singing okay too. We wait." So I trotted down to the ranch, weaving a little bit from side to side and humming, "Me just a worthless coyote." Say, that was a good song. When I was 20-25 yards away, I slowed to a walk. I could see Drover up ahead of me. He was peering off into the distance. The little dope hadn't even seen me. I decided to stop and watch him for a minute. He was all bunched up and tense. Off in the distance, he could hear Rip and Snort laughing and belching and having a good time. He'd cock his head and listen for a minute, and then he'd give out a yip, yip, yip. And on every yip, all 4 feet went off the ground. Then he'd stop and listen again. He never saw me, never had the slightest notion that I was sitting 10 yards away from him, watching the show. This was my replacement, understand? The guy who had taken over my job as head of ranch security. I didn't need to tell anyone that the ranch had gone completely and absolutely to pot. I cleared my throat. Drover froze. "What's that? Who's there?" "What's going on, son?" He gave his usual squeak, and in a flash he was highballing it for the machine shed, squalling like a turpentined cat. He'd gone maybe 10, 12 yards when he slowed to a walk, and then he stopped. "Hank, is that you?" "Uh-huh." "It is?" "Uh-huh." "How can I be sure? I thought you left the country." "Well, why don't you just trot your little self over here and see?" He came real slow, a few steps at a time. "It sure sounds like you." "Well, son of a gun." "You're not fooling me, are you, Hank?" "Get over here and quit messing around." "Oh, okay. I just had to be sure, that's all." He came creeping up to me. "Hank?" "Boo!" He screamed and jumped straight into the air. "Stop that, Hank! Don't do that to me! My nerves!" "Drover, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. What a pitiful excuse you are for a night watchman. I could have carried off half the chicken house and you'd never gotten the news." He hung his head low. "I know it. I'm a failure. Every morning I wake up and I say, 'Here's another day for you to mess up, Drover.' And I do. Every one of them. It hasn't been the same since you left, Hank." "Well, I knew it wouldn't. I tried to tell him, but they wouldn't listen. I mean, you can't treat a good dog like a dog and expect to keep him." "Gosh, I wish you'd come back." I laughed. "Well, you can forget that, son, 'cause it's never going to happen. I've found a better life." He looked me over real careful. "What's come over you, Hank? You look different. You smell different, too. You stink." "I've joined the Coyote tribe." I heard him gasp. "Oh, no." "That's right. And if you had a brain in your head, you'd come along up and join with me, too. It ain't a bad life, let me tell you." He took a couple of steps back. "I can't believe it. What would your mother say?" "She'd say I was a turncoat and a traitor, so what? I tried the straight life, I did my job, and what did I get? Abuse, ingratitude, no thanks. Life's too short for that. I'll cast my lot with the outlaws of the world." 3 weeks ago," he said in a quavery voice, "you were on the side of law and order, trying to catch the murderers. Now you're one of them?" "That's right." He started crying. "Oh, Hank, I can't take this. I used to admire you so much. You were my hero. I thought you were the greatest dog in the world. Since I was a pup, I just wanted to be like you, brave and strong and fearless." "Oh, knock it off, Drover. I don't want to hear that stuff." "And dedicated to duty? I knew I could never be as good as you, but I wanted to try. You were my idol, Hank." "Oh, cut it out, would you?" Come back home, Hanky. I need you. The ranch needs you. We all need you." That kind of struck me in the heart, hearing Drover say those things. And then Rip and Snort called for me. "Honk, come sing. We're tired waiting." "Who's that?" Drover whispered. "Oh, some of my pals. Come on up the hill with me, Drover, and I'll show you a good time, introduce you to my friends." "Are they drunk like you?" There was a little edge in his voice. He'd never talked to me that way before. "Well, maybe they are, and maybe they ain't. Who cares?" "I care. I don't associate with coyote trash." "Well, la-ti-da. Aren't we high and mighty tonight?" Drover dried his eyes with the back of his paw. I better get back to the ranch. I'm on guard tonight. I laughed in his face. Oops. You're on guard? You're a sorry excuse for a guard dog, running to the machine shed every time you hear a sound. I'm not going to run anymore. Somebody's got to protect the ranch, Hank. We can't depend on you anymore. You'll run. You always have and you always will. I ain't going to run. Sure you will, and I can prove it. Boo! He didn't run. Oh, that don't prove a thing. When the time comes and when the chips are down, you'll run and hide. He looked me in the eye. No, I won't. And Hank, if you come with them, I won't run from you either. He turned around and started walking away. You always were a little chump. He stopped. I may be a little chump, Hank, but I'm not a traitor. Goodbye. Go on, you little dummy. Who needs you anyways? Sawed-off, stub-tailed, self-righteous little pipsqueak. Drover went on his way, and I went on mine. On my way up the hill, I could hear the boys singing Me Just a Worthless Coyote again. I took my place between Rip and Snort and started belting out the high tenor. We went on like that all night long, singing and laughing and chasing mice. But it wasn't quite as much fun this time. And that is the end of our chapter. So until next time, boys and girls,